Those of WVON, Midway Broadcasting Corporation, or our participating sponsors.
Live from the Xfinity Studios at WVON. We're your original social media. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective with Linal Harris on 1690, The Talk of Chicago.
Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility. Find your power, passion, and purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dream. The best right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live. Let's find your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals, let your greatness flow with inspirational perspective.
Good morning, Chicago. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach right here on WVON 1690 AM, The Talk of Chicago. Inspirational Perspective on your radio is all about murdering mediocrity and living the best life possible. So as I ask you every Sunday morning, are you living the best life possible? And this is the place to be to explore that possibility. Well, good Sunday morning, everyone. And I'm excited to be here this morning. Speaking of living the best life possible, I have a very special guest this morning who will be with us and help us navigate along the way. And that is our very own Dr. Terry Mason. He'll be coming on at the bottom of the hour. Incredibly excited about that because today's topic is the fundamentals of health and well-being. Now, where did this come from? Well, as you guys know, last week I talked about the fundamentals, the number one fundamental of living. And we talked about the fundamentals of living and why, as human beings, when it comes to the simple things that we know we should do to live the absolute best life that we can possibly live, many of us, our attention is not on those things. We discussed some of the reasons why. We discussed what I believe is the number one fundamental of life, which is knowing your life's purpose and living in alignment with your life's purpose. And we'll be discussing more of that. But for those of you who know me well, one of the things that I look at in terms of looking at how do we transform how we live and looking at how do we live the best life possible is I look at this through the lens of a framework that I created some years ago called the 4 Pillars of Life. And when I think about the 4 Pillars of Life, this is ultimately my checklist of where am I and how am I doing in life holistically. So what are the 4 pillars of life? Well, pillar number 1 is health and well-being. Our number one priority. If when you think about your health and well-being, nothing else works if that pillar is out. If that pillar is weak, if that pillar is crumbling, then nothing else is working the way that you intend for it to work. Not even your purpose and your spirituality, which I deem as pillar number 4. Not because it's insignificant, not because it's any less than the others, but that's just where it falls. And in many ways, it falls last because I believe that is the anchor or the foundation of powerful living and tapping into our greatness. So pillar number 2 and 3, what are those? Well, pillar number 2 is love and relationships. As human beings, we're social, and we're constantly interacting with one another, whether we want to or not. And our ability to interact, our ability to love and experience love has a tremendous impact on how and what life may feel like, but how we live life and what life may feel like. And then pillar number 3, which is incredibly important as well, is work and money. So over the coming weeks, what we're going to be doing is exploring the fundamentals of each of these pillars or each of these categories. Now, when I think about each of these categories, I think about certain things. You might say, okay, well, isn't that enough? Yes. And I think we all know that when you think about your health and well-being, it's not as simple as just saying health and well-being. There are other aspects to our health and well-being that matter. And so in my organization, when we think about health and well-being, there are 3 other things that matter. And we kind of dive down on a deeper level to explore those things when you think about this pillar of health and well-being. Those 3 things being your physical health, surprise, surprise. I think we all kind of knew that one was coming. But also your mental dexterity, or one of the ways we could say it is your health IQ. But not just your health IQ, but your overall mental dexterity, your ability to really influence the intellectual growth that you have in your life. But in this case, more so around your health and well-being. Now, it does matter for the other pillars, this mental dexterity, right? Because one of the things when we talk about work and money is financial clarity. In order to be financially clear, you need to have some level of financial intelligence, right? So this aspect of the health and well-being pillar, it filters throughout the pillars overall, as the rest do, because your physical health has a lot to do with your financial clarity or your finances or the lack thereof. The lack of health typically leads to the lack of financial revenue and growth. So all these things are interconnected, if you will. And today what we want to talk about in particular is health and well-being. So you have physical health, mental dexterity, and then followed by your emotional fitness. And I'm incredibly excited to have Dr. Terry Mason on because he's going to be sharing with us what he believes are the top three fundamentals of health and well-being. And let me tell you, Dr. Mason and I, we converse often, but yesterday we had an opportunity to connect for quite a bit. And he was just kind of laying out his fundamental beliefs about health and well-being. And let me tell you, it was good. I'm incredibly excited for those of you listening this morning because you're in for not only a treat, but the kind of information that you just don't find available these days. And simple, what I would say, doable information if you are committed to your health and well-being. Some other things that he and I will be discussing over the time we have together is why these fundamentals really matter. Why do these fundamentals matter to your health? And we'll be diving in. We'll be taking your questions. You can give us a phone call at 773-591-1690. We'll talk about those top 3 fundamentals of healthy living and the things that we need to be focused on to live the absolute best life we can from a physical health perspective, from an emotional fitness perspective. But I'm also going to be asking him questions like, why do so many Americans struggle with their health? Here we are. This is supposed to be the greatest, quote unquote, country in the world. Yet, when you look at our health, we have some of the poorest health in the world. Why is that? I'll be asking Dr. Mason that question. And I'll also be asking him, how do we transform our health moving forward? If I'm someone, I've been struggling with my health for quite some time. How do I begin to really solidly shift my way of being around health, the unhealthy habits I've picked up over my lifetime? How do I begin to shift those habits into healthy habits so that I can transform my health moving forward? And then ultimately, we'll talk a bit about the consequences of avoiding the change in health that so many of us need. I'll be sharing some of the hacks and things that I've done to transform my own health, the way I think about transforming health, and some of the things I've done for clients over the years to help them transform their health. And so Dr. Mason and I will be combining together to really, really dive into this topic of the fundamentals of health and well-being. I'm incredibly excited about the remainder of today's show. But before we go there, last week we talked about the overall fundamentals. And in talking about that, I stressed the importance of purpose. And before Dr. Mason joins us this morning, I want to go back to that real quick. I had the opportunity. I always read the Facebook comments. Those of you who have joined already, thank you so much for joining here on Facebook. And if you're listening, you can join via Facebook Live to watch this video streaming right here in the Xfinity studios of WVON, downtown Chicago, and join that phenomenal community that is here every Sunday. And many of them are here right now. Thank you guys for joining. But Facebook Live, man, what I want to say about purpose is this. When I think about my life's purpose, it's had a tremendous impact on how I think about life and how I live my life, all the way down to what I put in my mouth, what I eat, what I drink. And we're going to be talking about a lot about that today. And I covered the importance of purpose and why purpose matters and why so many of us lack purpose. One of the things I talked about was identity theft. And I want to come back to that real quick, because when I talked about identity theft, and again, if you're a new listener, I'm not talking about somebody stealing your credit card information or your social security number and saying that they're you financially. I'm talking about something much worse than that, more insidious than that. And what I'm talking about is the affliction many of us have that shows up in our thoughts, the negative thoughts and the negative thinking that is sourced by this identity theft. Many years ago, many of us were told that you'll never amount to anything. Many years ago, we were told you can't do that. Many years ago, we were told all types of things that we could not do. Many of us have been told that because of your skin color, you're not worthy, or because of your skin color, you won't excel. And those are what I believe. Even sometimes when you say, well, I don't believe it, we begin to act in it. And as human beings, we can cast spells on one another, right? We're spiritual beings. We're on a spiritual journey, and Dr. Mason and I are going to talk a lot about that. And on the spiritual journey, when these type of spells, quote unquote, are cast on us, they have an impact. And many times the only way to reverse the impact of that is to, as a creator yourself, openly declare what is next in your life. And I have an opportunity for, the listeners and those of you who listen on a weekly basis, that if in any way you believe that you suffered some form of identity theft and you lack full connection to your purpose, I have an upcoming workshop on November 7th. And you can join me that Saturday, November 7th at 11 a.m. for the Discover and Live Your Purpose, Your Life's Purpose workshop. And this is going to be a transformational virtual workshop that I guarantee you will connect you to your greatness, your reason for being, but ultimately your life's purpose. And I have a very special guarantee, because what I guarantee is if you don't walk out knowing your life's purpose with strategies on how to live your life's purpose in a clear way, I will give you all your money back. That's the guarantee. Purpose is incredibly important, and I want to do all I can to support you all with that. And so what you can do is you can go to linalharris.com to register to get more information. And so at some point during this broadcast, I'm sure we're going to be talking about purpose. I'm sure we're going to be talking about the depth of what it means to live aligned with your purpose, as in many ways Dr. Terry Mason has done for so many years. And I want to make sure that you have all the tools necessary to live the best life you possibly can live. And I believe priority number one is knowing your life's purpose. So with that, we have Dr. Mason with us, and I'd like to bring Dr. Mason on. Dr. Mason, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Harris. I am always so excited to be with you. You know, we always have our great chats after the shows.
Yes.
But this is great that we have an opportunity to have a conversation this morning. So I'm really grateful for that.
Absolutely. I'm grateful as well. And thank you for being here. Dr. Mason, for those of you all who may not know him, is a media personality. Dr. Mason, I'll tell you something, man. I'll be watching a documentary. The last one I watched was Game Changers. And I'll be watching a documentary, and then there you go. You'll pop up, and you'll be providing the wonderful insights that you provide us, every Sunday here on WVON. So we're lucky to have you here at 10 a.m. Right here. But you're also providing those same tips to the world as a media personality. So Dr. Mason is a media personality and a retired public health executive who's given. How many years have you given to public service, Dr. Mason?
You mean including my time as a practicing physician?
Yes, sir.
Well, I would say it's getting close to. I was a private practicing physician for 26 years. And I was on VON all of that time, too. So I would say that probably over 30 years, 35 years.
Wow.
Or more. And it's been my pleasure, and it has been my purpose to do this, because many of the things that we suffer from, we suffer either from a gross misunderstanding or misinformation or ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance in a pejorative way. I mean, if you don't know, that means you're ignorant. That doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means that you don't know.
Right.
And then once you do know, then you have the opportunity and responsibility now to act on what you've been taught.
Beautiful. Well, Dr. Mason, I just want to acknowledge you for your service over the years, and acknowledge the work that you've done in our community, in particular to bring awareness to health. I'm incredibly excited to have you on the show this morning. And I want to start off because I want to spend as much time as we can on the fundamentals of health and well-being. Last night when we had a short chat, I asked you about what do you believe are the top 3 fundamentals of healthy living. And I want to get right into it. But you know what? The one thing that's on my mind before we get right into that is we're experiencing another surge in cases here in Illinois, across the country. And I just want to ask you, the conversation we're having today, would this help our health? in the facet of our ability to potentially fight off and ward off the impact of COVID-19 in the event that we were to contract it?
Yes, I think it would. I think that the things that we're going to talk about today would help tremendously. If you noticed in the news, most of what they reported was that there was an increased adverse effect in African Americans. And it wasn't because we were African Americans. It was because we had, like others, we are obese, we are suffering, and obesity already means that you have a significant amount of inflammation. And remember now that this virus creates tremendous inflammation. And so there are cells in our fat cells that actually accentuate inflammation. In fact, part of obesity is an inflammatory disease. The second thing, diabetes. Diabetes is also related to inflammation. So this provides an additional environment for this particular disease to flourish. And of course, the underlying lung conditions like asthma, what have you, these are all inflammatory diseases. What does that mean when I say inflammatory?
I was going to ask you that.
Well, yeah, what does that mean? Well, if you think about if you scrape your knee or you cut yourself or you have even a cold, the one thing you'll notice is that you get a fever. Why do you get a fever? Well, the fever is a physical sign that this war is taking place in your body. The cells that are trying to kill or neutralize the things that are creating problems for you release these proteins that cause the fever. And this fever is not a bad thing. This fever is a sort of good thing. We always want to do things to cut the fever down, but we only want to do that if it starts getting too high. But the point I was trying to make is this. When you correct, if you take black folks and deal with the fact that why we have more diabetes, why we have more obesity, why we have all of these additional asthma, all these different underlying issues, what you find is once you correct for that, we actually do better. We actually do better in fighting COVID than everyone else by some almost 10%.
Wow.
In other words, we do better. Yes.
Wow.
So what we need to understand is that this is not a problem because we are black. Our blackness is a surrogate for many instances living in conditions that are less than optimal, not having access to the kind of healthcare that is not really based upon an emergent problem.
Got you.
You understand what I mean?
I do.
Not necessarily taking the time or understanding how to properly manage our disease processes, particularly with the third thing, and that is that Mari Gallagher just demonstrated very nicely in her study back in 2010, the proximity of being able to go and get good foods, good fruits and vegetables versus the nearness of the fast food joints that make it far more far easier for us to access the very things that are creating the inflammation in the first place.
Got it.
And diabetes, which results in diabetes, hypertension, or what we call obesity. We have been made to believe that these are all different diseases, but they are not.
Now,
they're different manifestations of one disease.
Dr. Mason, let me ask you a question. So I saw a post
Sure.
not too long ago that I didn't know how to be with. And for me, I don't know how to be with something. It's interesting. But it was a post from a young lady who is much younger than me, who was basically sharing that she had diabetes. She had contracted diabetes. And that basically she was in some ways defending the fact that she had diabetes and said, hey, look, this is just me. And I used to feel funny when I would have to maybe take my insulin shot in public, or I guess now they have these pens, which makes it much easier. And people would kind of look at me funny. And now I just look at them back and say, whatever, this is how I live. And I remember reading the post, and it was a little bit more. And I was thinking like my heart was heavy for her. Because I'm like, well, you don't have to live like that. But she was defending that way of living, almost as if it's normal. And I get that many of us believe that these diseases, because they're so prevalent in our communities, that they're normal. And I'm just curious on your take on that. I think we both know they're not normal, but what would you say to somebody who's gotten to a point where they're like, this is just the way it is? It's normal to take high blood pressure medication. It's normal to have diabetes. It's normal. Like, I'm curious about your professional opinion on that.
Well, that's a great observation about the normalization of abnormality. We do that because so many people in our circle of friends may have these conditions. So many people in our family may have these conditions, and maybe even multi-generations within our family may have these conditions. Mm-hmm. And so we grow up with the acceptance of this abnormality as normal. It has been normalized in this way, even though it is not a normal situation. And so I understand exactly what this young lady says, because in her world, it is normal. In her world, this is her reality. Yeah. And unfortunately, is the reality of too many of our people who are suffering from these things, and anybody that's suffering from these things. And they need to understand that it is not all entirely their fault. You see, there is, and we can probably get into this a little later. Yeah. But we masquerade this notion of a healthcare system. And the healthcare system is not a healthcare system at all. It is a disease detection and management system. Yeah. And there is no value proposition for health in America. It's all about curing, not curing, I'm sorry, but managing. Yeah, managing what goes wrong versus curing and restoring health when things go wrong. And so this is what I've been talking about now for almost 30 years, is really trying to fight this sort of uphill intellectual construct battle. And what I mean by that is we've so normalized abnormality that the first thing you have to do is get people to understand that there's nothing wrong with them per se. It is something wrong with the habits or things that they have or been taught or only exposed to, and the conditions in which they live. Because we know where you work, live, and play has more to do with how long you live than your so-called genetics. Wow. Okay. So with that, I think that is a great segue into the fundamentals. Let's talk about the fundamentals, because that was a mouthful, and right now there may be somebody out there who has one of these conditions. And they're like, well, okay, so now what? Now what, Dr. Mason? Now what, Linal? Let's get to the fundamentals. What are some things that I can begin to do to take back my health? But more importantly, what are the top three? What are the top three things that I can begin to do to take back my health and to, instead of managing my disease, begin to reverse and restore optimal health in my body? What would you say the number one thing is, Dr. Mason, if you were, sharing and saying, hey, you have to, you must do this? What would be the number one thing for you? Well, first of all, I think we need to understand those three pillars that we talked about, that you mentioned earlier. Yes, please, program. Please. And the way I look at them is three things, and they all work together. They're not separate, and that's your mental, your spiritual, and your physical. Those three pillars, you have to have or begin to think about how to begin to increase your knowledge of how these things impact everything that's going on in your body. And when I say mental, what I'm looking at is, or what I'm trying to talk about is, you've got to think about the precision at which your eyes can see things, the definition that your ears can hear things, and the absolute miraculous way that we take in what we see and we hear into our brain, and how our brain has been trained to process those things. So we have had a situation in America where we have internalized abnormality as normal. We have created new normals to fit these conditions, so it doesn't even appear that they're abnormal. So let me go to the other two, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
So we talked about mental, and then physical, and we talked about spiritual.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about religion. When I talk about spiritual, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with your core systems of things you believe. Maybe you don't even know, but you believe.
Right.
Because sometimes people can believe all kinds of things. And those beliefs are oftentimes shaped by the information inputs that we get. And what we don't always realize in this society, there are many information inputs that you get that you don't even know you're getting. We call them subliminal.
Yep.
Okay, they're subliminal kind
that hit the subconscious. Hit the subconscious and disrupt your programming.
Exactly. Or reinforce your bad program.
Right.
So those are the things. So we got our mental, we got our physical, and of course spiritual. And spiritual, to me, is sort of the real engine behind a lot of this stuff. Because and I'm not talking about where you go to church or what church you believe in or what denomination you are. Probably has nothing to do with that. It has to do, and this is why, Linal, and we'll get into this later, but this is why what has happened to us, and I heard you talk about this early on in the show, but what we have to look at and understand why it was so important that the images that we were given of our deities, Jesus Christ, even pictures of, if you Google God, the pictures that come up. And the imagery around everything in the books that we read about that. Right. And the movies that we saw about that. It reinforced a construct that created an inferiority in us. Because we didn't see ourselves, we certainly didn't see ourselves manifested on a daily basis in positions of authority. We certainly didn't, and unless there was a one-off, we didn't see ourselves represented in our books of deity. And that is, I'm talking about Bibles and Quran, things of that nature.
Or even in children's books. I know it's, with my son being 3 years old, I'm really, really thoughtful about, the books he's reading and what those pictures look like.
Right, because those things are going to, because when you see things in books and things of this nature, there is an elevation of your thinking around it, because it must be true, it must be important if it's being written about and being discussed in these academic venues. So what am I saying? There's a reason why many of us have, even at a subconscious level, a subtle inferiority complex. And that's because of the successful implementation of the global white supremacy program. You see, white supremacy, and that's why I don't like to use the words racism or things like that. And I've talked about this on my show. We've talked about the papers that we referenced this to.
Right.
But when you have a worldwide, I'm not talking about in America, I'm talking about a
it's a
worldwide
global thing.
intellectual construct
Yeah.
that says that you don't have to value anything of color. The language, the people, the land, whatever, that you can go in and wholesale slaughter the people if necessary to take the land, like much of what happened here in America.
And what is still happening today in the Democratic
And what is
Republic
still
of Congo.
happening today.
And I can go down the
That's
list
right.
of countries, yeah.
So, but we have to understand this is a worldwide strategy, okay? Not just a local thing. It's worldwide. So why is that important to understand that? It's important because one of the manifestations of that is a $10 billion business in skin bleaching cream across the world. $10 billion.
And that's just one industry that's profiting from this.
That's just one industry.
Yeah.
Now, why is that important? Why do I want to mention this? Why do I harp on this all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Because what does it mean for a person to want to spend and use chemicals to lighten or bleach their skin? What kind of intellectual disconnect do you have with your own sense of value that allows you or creates in you a need to negate yourself this way?
So I want to draw a correlation to this real quick, Dr. Mason, because I believe that our spiritual capacity is evident in what we create around us. And what I hear you say is that this construct of European superiority or white supremacy, whatever you want to call it, this construct that it has been placed in us subliminally, no matter who you are, whether you're of European descent, African descent, Asian descent. I mean, because I've been to parts of Asia where this bleaching is happening too. And no matter who you are, that in many ways it's permeated us all the way down to the spirit in terms of what we're looking to create. And so now I'm trying to recreate myself. But in many ways, it sounds like what you're saying is it's also the source of me not loving myself the way I should, which in effect is part of what's having such a negative consequence on our health. If I don't love myself, then I'm willing to in some ways look past my health. I'm willing to eat things that would hurt my health. And I'm doing it, and by the way, we're talking about this directly. For many of us, this is happening subconsciously, and we don't even understand that while I know to do some of the things we're going to talk about are the right things, I'm not doing them because spiritually, and this is something you said last night, so I'm drawing from that, spiritually, I don't believe it.
Right, and I don't see myself as wonderfully made. And I'm not saying everybody does this way, but I don't see myself as wonderfully made. And if I look in the mirror and I reflect what I look at what I see in that reflection, and I'm not as in love with that as I need to be, and I'm not saying nobody is, but I'm just saying we have to look at this on a deeper level because it drives the dysfunction that we perpetrate on ourselves as well as the dysfunction that we perpetrate on people that look like us.
So Dr. Mason, let me ask you this. So are you saying that the number one fundamental of health and well-being is to reclaim your spiritual clarity? I mean, because that's the first place you went.
Yeah, the spiritual, because see, it's so deeply ingrained. It's so deeply ingrained. I mean, when I recall, and I've used this clip many times from a movie called Dark Girls.
Yeah.
And in this movie called Dark Girls, there is a place or a piece of it where this young lady who is darker skinned says, I took my skin color from my father and I hate him for it.
Ooh, that's
pathological.
That's deep.
You understand what I'm saying to you?
Whew.
And we reinforce those stereotypes in our own homes many times.
Yeah.
And if you
yeah.
look at how we still consider what is beautiful in terms of how, and I don't want the sisters to be getting mad and all that sort of stuff.
No, let's speak the truth.
What is hair? But when we think about hair,
yeah, that's complicated.
I don't want, now we're buying, in many cases, hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of hair. And I don't want to just put it on the sisters, because you got to understand, brothers are enticing or wanting that value ethic. I'm not saying across the board, but there's enough of it that we still have this self-negation based on the impact of the success of the global white supremacy strategy being implemented around the world.
So Dr. Mason, if let's clarify this fundamental. I want to make it as simple as possible, because when I'm thinking about this, what I'm hearing you say is that if you want to advance your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, that the number one fundamental that you're calling out right now before you go anywhere else is that you have to focus on spiritual development.
And you have to look. And when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about religion.
I know.
I'm talking about looking at yourself as a wonderfully made creature by our Creator, who deserves, has a right to, and has an obligation to continue to promulgate who we are, to use and unleash our genius for the betterment of everybody, including, but not, first of all, with ourselves at an individual level, because if you don't have individual health, you can't have collective wealth. And this is what I see has been a destruction, and why I think of integration as intellectually as a strategy that didn't fail, but unfortunately took a real toll on us, because we fought so hard to be what we never could be from one point of view. That we lost ourselves in that journey.
Well, what I'm hearing, and this is something I talk about in the purpose course, that many of us have become so, let's say, outward focused, right? So physically focused. And when I say physically focused, I'm not talking about health. I'm talking about what I see. So what I see, for instance, Dr. Terry Mason's skin tone, Linal Harris's skin tone, and based on the skin tone, can I listen? Do I believe? Etc. We've become so outwardly focused on ourselves and on others that we have forgotten ultimately that despite what people say, despite this construct that's in place around European domination and superiority, despite all of these things, we are on a spiritual journey. And the spiritual journey is sourced by the Creator. And because I'm alive, I'm great. And if I can start there, if I can somehow believe that and begin to develop myself around that, then just maybe I can begin to fight this system that's in place that's influencing me to do things that are unhealthy to my physical body.
Yes, and we'll get to that. I hope we have some time left.
We do. We have the next hour. The next hour we can go into some of the tangibles.
Yeah, because I don't want to leave that, and I really encourage people to, you can go and just watch the clip of the movie Dark Girls. It's still on YouTube.
Hey,
and look at it yourself.
What you said was clear to me. That was clear when I hate my father because of the skin tone he gave me. That's deep. And here's the thing. It starts on the outside, but it becomes a cancer on the inside. And when I say cancer on the inside, it's spiritual cancer, because now I hate myself. And it takes away from my ability in many ways, as I might say, to then powerfully create and live aligned with the purpose God has given for my life, because I'm so far off track. I'm so far off track at this point because I'm focused on the exterior, not only of myself but of others, versus
Absolutely.
the one thing that matters, which is the spiritual relationship and the spiritual journey that we're all on, and the role that we need to play spiritually.
And when we come, I don't know, we have to take a break, but
We do.
what I want to do is I want to show how successful that's been by using some excerpts from a lecture that I gave at Trinity United Church of Christ, where we talked about the damage that this has done, is that it has crippled our spiritual immune identity system. In other words, what has happened is that this doctrine, the successful implementation of this doctrine, I liken it to an AIDS virus.
You know what,
So
Dr. Mason? Let's come back to that. We got to take a quick break. But if you're joining us, you're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris. That's Dr. Terry Mason's voice that you heard there, who has joined us to talk about the fundamentals of health and well-being. Let me tell you, man, you don't want to miss the rest of the show. We'll get into more of the tangible fundamentals, but Dr. Terry Mason has taken us down a route to ensure that we hit the root cause of what's getting in the way of our health and well-being. Don't change that dial. We'll be right back.
The talk of Chicago and the voice of the nation.
Wow.
1690 WVON, Berwyn, Chicago.
Including
Man.
during the final debate.
I always love
Today,
having Dr. Mason on, because you never, you know, I knew where he was going. And last night he talked about this notion of spiritual amnesia when him and I were chatting. I didn't know he was going to hit it as number one, though. I know what all three are. I didn't know he was going to say that's number one. I thought he was going to go, a little simpler. Let's open it up. But he just went right in. I love it. I love it. What questions do you all have that you'd like for me to ask Dr. Mason? Let me know. If you've already shared the question, I'm going to ask that you just copy and paste it again so I can see it in the brand new comments, because it is difficult sometimes to go through this. Let me tell you something. Someone just said, this is deep. You have to understand that when you look at how we're living today, 21st century, information age, disinformation age, all in one at this point. Which, by the way, the information age has ended. We're now in the robotics and AI age, but information age is still upon us, right? The things that Dr. Mason, the tangible things that Dr. Mason and I will talk about in the second hour, you already know. But there's a reason you're not doing it. And that's why I believe Dr. Mason wants to talk about this first. We know we should drink water. Like you know this, but you don't do it. And what Dr. Mason is pointing to, and I think he's going to talk more about this, what Dr. Mason is pointing to is that the reason you're not doing it is not because you got bad habits. It is not because you can't remember. It is not because whatever other excuse that you may give yourself. The reason you're not doing it is because you're not spiritually developed enough. You've been told, you've been taught that you are not enough. Therefore, you don't even deserve good, clean water to put into your body so it can function well, so you can function without fatigue, so you can function at your optimal levels. Like, there's a part of us that doesn't even believe we deserve it. That's why we don't do it. That's what he's pointing to. And we were having this conversation, and he calls it spiritual amnesia. Like, you don't know who you are, right? You can't even recall who you really truly are. And as a result, and I might be getting in front of him, but he can explain it better than I can. But as a result, because you don't know who you are, you're completely mistreating the vessel that you're supposed to be on the spiritual journey with, which is your body. It's one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of purpose, because when you lock in on your purpose and you realize what's at stake, who the other lives that are at stake, and all the things that are impacted, the dominoes that fall, if you live and if you don't live your purpose, like it shifts things, right? It becomes really serious. And when you begin to realize every morning you wake up, you're actually on a spiritual journey versus this physical journey that we seem to be so obsessed with, then it begins to change things. And then now, this is my temple, literally. And so I'm very thoughtful about how I take care of the temple, which has a tremendous impact on my health. So then when we get to the other tangible things that he'll be sharing later, now it becomes a must, right? Now it's that thing I must do to enhance my spiritual journey versus the other way around. A lot of us think about it like, health first. And he's saying, no, it's spiritual first. From a doctor, by the way. It's good stuff. All right, what does he think about Irish sea moss? I can tell you now, you guys, that Dr. Terry Mason, he's probably not going to get into those type of particulars. He's going to tell you, look, do the work you need to do in terms of what you think is right. But none of these things, Irish sea moss, none of that is going to counteract putting junk in your body. I'm going to tell you already. I know him well. That's what he's going to say. So don't be asking me about supplements and all the, like, what are you putting on your body on a daily basis? Because what he, like, when I talk to him, what he's basically saying is, often we do these things that give us a psychological, I feel better because, I put this in my drink. He said, but then you turn around and eat a plate full of red meat and flour and starch and sugar and whatever else that we eat that we know is not good for us. He's like, so what? So why you asking me that question? I've heard him actually say that to people. What are the ways to guard ourselves from the infiltration of this spiritual depleting agenda, because it seems to be everywhere? First is awareness. The first part is awareness. When you become incredibly aware, you start to spot it, right? I'll see commercials. I'm like, man, here we go, right? You become incredibly aware that it's all around you, and then you begin to counter program yourself with your program. Drink, like for me, I have a constant. One of the notifications I do get on my iPhone: drink water. I don't get Facebook notifications. I don't get Instagram notifications. I don't get Snap notifications. I don't get Twitter notifications. None of that pops and beeps on my phone. What I get, water notification, right? I get my program. Those are the notifications I get. I think that's part of creating the awareness around running our own agenda. If you're getting shopping notifications, all these type of notifications, it's all there, right? As soon as you pop it up, you don't see somebody that looks like you, that's your color, your weight. You see something else that's going to make you feel inferior. All right, we're coming back.
Inspirational Perspective with Linal Harris on 1690, The Talk of Chicago.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility. Find your power, passion, and purpose.
By the way, share the stream. It's making sense to you. All right, we're back. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris. And this morning, we're talking about the fundamentals of health and well-being. I have a very special guest, my good friend, and also WVON's own Dr. Terry Mason, who is the host of A Doctor's in the House at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And so be sure to stick around and listen to his program later on today. But I'm especially happy and I feel privileged to have Dr. Mason on the line right now. We're discussing the fundamentals of health and well-being. Dr. Mason, let me tell you, man, I was looking at the Facebook stream and the comments over the break. And one of the things I saw was, all I can say is, wow. I think what you're sharing with us is resonating and opening eyes in a brand new way. And so I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for taking some time to be with us this morning and chat about the fundamentals of health and well-being. And let me tell you, if you missed what Dr. Mason shared as what he believes the number one fundamental in the first hour around our spiritual awakening and our spiritual development, so we can recognize the agenda of European superiority, or what is also called, quote unquote, I don't even like to say it, white supremacy, and the impact that has on many of us in our community in terms of our own health and well-being. And by the way, not just in our community, but this is having an impact on those of European descent as well, because of the programming that we see on our televisions, the programming that we see on our cell phones, the programming that we see almost everywhere. Dr. Terry Mason was sharing that with us. And Dr. Terry Mason, thank you for being with us again this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'd like to, if I might, just finish this put a few more minutes in this discussion this morning. Mm-hmm. And because I think this is where the rubber really meets the road. Mm-hmm. And part of that has to do with the real, and I don't like to use the word supremacy either. It's just a strategy that communicates an idea. Right. Because racism, I don't believe, is a term that really talks about what it really is. Mm-hmm. It covers it up. But what I want to say is this, is that the real danger of what we talked about from a spiritual level is that many of you may remember the AIDS epidemic and the AIDS issues. And what the AIDS stood for, the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And what that meant was, in our bodies, in all of our bodies, we have an amazing armed forces. And those are called our white blood cells. Not that they're white, but they are the white blood cells, or leukocytes. And basically what happens, there's a special one called the T cell that comes from the thymus gland. It's called the killer T cell. It has the ability, those cells that come from there, like many cells in our body, have the ability to identify every cell that's ours. Every cell that's in your body, Linal, has your name stamped on it, your identity stamped on it. Mm-hmm. So your body will not attack those cells. Now, there are times, just to the side now, there are times when we do have our body attack our own cells. We call those autoimmune diseases. That's what happens with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and things of that nature. Right. But what I want to get to is that this condition, what happened to us at another level was our immune cells that were supposed to eradicate things that were not a part of our body, or in this case, a part of our psyche, were damaged. And what happened was the AIDS virus worked by infiltrating this particular cell, the T cell. Mm-hmm. And it went into the cell and disabled its mechanisms to defend the body. In other words, the AIDS virus went into the cell, actually took over the machinery in the cell that helped to reproduce the cell. And instead of reproducing more T cells, it reproduced more AIDS virus particles.
Got you.
And then these AIDS virus particles went around infecting other T cells to make sure that they were not able to fight the AIDS virus, but actually become the AIDS virus manufacturing plant. And so more and more these these viruses went around and destroyed our cells. And what we died from were what we call opportunistic infections. In other words, these are infections where that bacteria or germ was present in our body all the time, but because our immune system was intact,
we were able to fight.
We were able to fight, defend, and destroy these foreign invaders.
Got you.
And that's a metaphor for what I believe happened to our own identity system with global white supremacy acting as the AIDS virus or the identity virus.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yes.
And so what it did is it went into us, and it decoupled us. It destroyed our ability to continue to defend what we would normally defend, because now that had taken our identity away from us, and now we could not recognize these foreign invaders.
And so we in many ways, like you said, now we're producing that which is hurting us.
That's right. We are now helping. Our system has been taken over. Our psyche has been taken over. And now, rather than being a psyche that helps to encourage and at us on a collective level and on an individual level by making sure that we do the best things for our health, we're actually participating in our own destruction.
Dr. Mason, can I give an example of that?
Absolutely.
So, because I want to bring this to life. When I decided to change my diet and stop eating red meat, chicken, basically red meat, poultry, and pork. When I took that out of my diet, and I also took some other things out of my diet that cause inflammation for the reasons you shared earlier in the show. When I would go around family and friends, right? Often I would be ridiculed for eating in many ways the right way and taking care of myself. Oh man, a man don't eat that. What are you doing? And I was sharing with you last night that if I hadn't made a clear spiritual shift and I wasn't really fully aware of why I had made those changes in my life, if my why wasn't clear and distinct, the level of peer pressure I received around my diet initially, and even still now sometimes, more than likely, that peer pressure would have pushed me off of my plan. And what I hear you saying is that when you talk about this AIDS virus and these T cells and how it goes into the body and basically these T cells, it takes over how the T cells function to produce more AIDS cells. In many ways, that's what we do. Someone says,
that's what we do.
I'm taking care of my health, and we go, oh man, forget that. Take this piece of cake. Or someone says, no, I'm not going to drink that. Oh man, well, you're a punk. You should, you can drink, well, you can drink that. And what I'm hearing you say is in many ways, this programming has gone so deep that now we are perpetuating the program on one another and hurting each other's health.
Which is the absolute epitome of success of the programming.
Wow.
When they don't have to be even present. There's some studies that show that we even speak differently when there are white people in the room.
Man.
Even if they're not going to say anything, if they're just there.
It's just the influence of that, like almost like a loss of self.
That's right. So this is why I've spent so much time talking about this, because it is the lack of our reinforcing of our, and I'm not talking about just an outward reinforcing. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about an inward reinforcing. And I'm talking about not just recolorizing things. That's not the whole point. We'll just make the colors, because they did that even in some of our spiritual books. And they colored the people, but they didn't change often the features of it.
Yeah.
So you could still see underneath that what it was really trying to do. So I'm saying to us that and this is why, or part of the reasons why we have the attitudes that we have toward each other that push us away from the kinds of cooperation, and I'm not saying across the board, but this is what those things are. This is why we have people, I forget the couple that went around trying to find black business. And as we look around now, I think about, I grew up,
I believe it's
when we used to have
Maggie Anderson.
20,
yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah.
Then we used to have 23, I think someone told me we had 23 black automobile dealerships. And today we may have one. We used to have 7 black banks, and we may have one. But even more of a tragedy is that we used to have 500 black hospitals across the United States, and today we have 0.
Wow.
So it is, and so what drives that? When you see other people who are real clear about who they are and whose they are. In other words, their spirituality reinforces their identity, and their identity makes sure that they then do what they need to do to preserve that identity on an individual and collective level.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So, Dr. Mason.
And so I'm trying to bring all of that and put that bow in it before we move on.
And man, have you done it. I want to appreciate you starting this way, because I think that if somebody's just now tuning in, when you begin to share the tangibles around like the fundamentals of health and well-being, and they find that they're having a hard time implementing something that should be simple, what I hear you saying is take a look at your spiritual development. Take a look at your programming. And in many ways, what we need to do is to focus on reprogramming ourselves and spiritually developing ourselves so we can take on the simple, tangible fundamentals that will return us to physical health.
Yeah, in many ways that's absolutely true. But the one thing one caveat is you got to be careful about what you mean. See, we function on what we believe, not what we know.
So, and I love that, because you and I discussed that last night, and you.
That's right.
So break that down.
See, people, for example, if you don't believe, for whatever reason, that changing the way you eat can have an impact on your life, you just don't believe that, you won't do it. Even though you might know it.
And Dr. Mason, let's tackle some, because somebody's probably saying, "Well, I do believe it." And what I hear you saying, and this is what I believe too, right? When we talk about belief, like true belief is conviction that impacts action.
Yes, sir. You better talk now.
Yeah. So belief is conviction that impacts action. So what I hear you saying is, when you don't do it, you don't believe it. So if you say, "Well, I do believe that, sugar is bad for me," what you're saying is, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because you continue to eat it. And true conviction, true belief, leads to an action that's aligned with it. That's what I hear you saying.
See, that's what you do that's right. And that's what you do with coaching. What you're trying to do is get people to shift the belief they have in their own ability to accomplish what it is they want to do.
That's right. That you can do this.
About.
And you have to, yeah. And what I hear you saying is, we have to start there. We have to start with our belief system, which is spiritually based.
That's right. Not religiously, but spiritually. See, because when people go way above and beyond what even people think you can do, I mean, when Venus and all these other people Venus Williams, all these people that excel in these areas, they were able to do that because even through their pain, even through the defeat, even through everything else, there was a force that was deep, that was their belief.
Yeah, man, there was a conviction
that made them come back up again.
Yeah, I'm great. A conviction and a belief that I'm great and that I can surmount this. Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter how much I hurt physically. It doesn't how much you ridicule me physically. It doesn't how much you think that I will never come back. No, if I truly believe, I don't mean just say it with my mouth, but if I really believe it, I can change. People change the world on belief. I mean, just think about it.
Yeah.
The implementation of the belief in global white supremacy had people conquer and eliminate, slaughter people all over the world.
That's true. Because, yeah, they believed that other lives did not matter.
Didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I know I spent a lot of time, and I know didn't get to the other two, but the other two are dependent on.
Well, we have time. We have time now. So I think we have it. I think we get it. So now we have set the stage for people to actually take action in the other two fundamentals that will have a tremendous impact on their health. What is number two?
Well, we spent a lot of time on the spiritual. Mm-hmm. But the spiritual sets the context for the environment of the mental.
Right.
Okay? So the mind is the mental piece is what I call the implementer.
Okay.
It takes what the spirit believes and acts and makes it actionable. Mm-hmm. You follow me?
Agreed. I could fully agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, when I went to, and I'm going to tell you give you an example of the spiritual piece. When I got to medical school at the University of Illinois, when I was going to go to medical school at the University of Illinois, I had to take a class at Loyola University with the physics, I think it was a physics class or what have you. And the teacher told me that, look, and I wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, you can forget about trying to go to medical school. And I looked at him, he goes, you won't make it. I said, you know what? You don't know the God I serve.
Hey.
That's what I told him.
Hey. Yeah.
He looked at me like I was crazy. But here I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, here I am nearly 25 years later, not only having a great career as a board-certified urologist,
man,
but moving to the top in many of the things that were done. That's why I'm saying you got to understand that when God made you, he didn't make no junk. But if you groom yourself, if you feed yourself a diet that is spiritually anemic, that does not contain those things that help you grow spiritually. I'm talking about religiously. I'm saying spiritually.
Right.
That is the force that fuels the I will, that part of your being.
Yes.
See, because when you
the creator, that's the creator part of the being. I mean, and I share this all the time.
That's right, because there's no force greater than that.
That's right. That we are creators. God is a creator. We're made in his image. Right. He's a macro creator who created all things around us. We're micro creators creating our own reality in this moment.
And that reality can be one way or another.
That's right. Based
because
on,
you got to remember, Satan was a god too.
There you go.
So you got to understand that the powers of things that will move you towards your goal of good or away from your goal of good is those things are almost equally as powerful. It's just a matter of what kind of environment do you create spiritually, mentally, and physically in your body. So when you then eat those things, because you got to remember now, and I'll say this very quickly,
yep.
The major value proposition, we do not have a healthcare system in America at all. There's nothing that you go into the hospital or clinic for. Yes, they will manage your disease, but they won't cure it.
That's been my experience. I shared this. Let me share this real quick, Dr. Mason. I think this will help the conversation. When I was 39 going on 40, I went into my doctor's office. And by the way, I had a long-term physician. I mean, I had been with him since I was 15 years old. Phenomenal physician. And so really nothing negative towards him, but to reinforce what you're sharing as a fellow doctor, right? I went in and I said, man, my knee hurts real bad when I play basketball, and I want to do something about it. Dr. Mason, he looked at me and said, what are you doing running around like that at your age? And I was in shock. I was in shock. Like, don't you want me to move? isn't that one of the fundamentals of health and well-being? Movement, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And he was like, you're getting older, and if you hurt yourself, it's going to be harder to heal. And I'm thinking, like, it's kind of I'm asking how to remove the pain, and you're telling me to stop moving. And so I had to go on my own journey of healing my body to reduce the inflammation in my knee, because that's what it was, inflammation, right? That was causing the pain. And you pointed that out. I had to go on my own journey of increasing my intellectual knowledge about my health, so then I could begin to take actions that would reduce the pain and inflammation in my body. And I was successful with that. But part of that success was creating the diet where I don't eat red meats and chickens and poultry and pork and all the things that cause inflammation in my body. And I upticked my water intake and intaking the things that would be healthy for my joints so I can continue that level of movement. But I think go ahead.
That's great. No, I'm just going to say that oftentimes the secrets, the pearls that we need to use to improve our health, they're not hidden. They're not hidden. They're just covered up. I would tell you that why I left my practice to go to work in public health was because I came to the realization. Actually, I went over to Soul Veg one day and I was talking to Prince Asiel, and I was frustrated because I was doing a lot of work in prostate cancer and what have you, and I'm like, why can't we cure this? And why can't, what is really going on here? Because, you could take the prostate out, but what did that do? I mean, if I couldn't take the prostate out, somebody say, yeah, your margin's clear, we got everything out, you don't have to worry about it. I couldn't do that because it's not true. It's not true. And what I subsequently learned is the role that food played in creating the environment that was conducive for the initiation and propagation of cancer.
Right.
And those things, and the issue that I had to come to terms with is that as a physician, we have been trained to be arbiters of pharmaceuticals, surgery, and other kinds of things. That's what we're trained to do. Because when we...
And so let me put that, can I put that in layman's terms? What I hear you saying is, as physicians, you've been trained to sell the products of the medical field.
That's right. That's why it's a $3 trillion industry. And so when you go, and believe me, let's say you have high blood pressure and you go to get high blood pressure medicine. Well, what happens?
But even that, I'm sorry, Dr. Mason, but even that sounds crazy to me. I have high blood pressure, and so I go to get, why am I not going to get a nutritional plan?
Because that's not what you're taught to do. That's not what the system does. The system does not do that. The system says you go to your doctor, and your doctor has not been trained, because I can tell you, in 4 years of medical school, I got 40 minutes of nutrition. It wasn't that much.
40 minutes?
And it wasn't that good. 40 minutes in 4 years. Yes. So we don't get nutrition. And obviously been a while since I've been in med school, and we've been trying to get more of that in. And even what the dietitians are permitted to tell us must be in line with what they've been taught. And those things have to be sanctioned by different bodies within the federal government who make certain that whatever food pyramid that comes up, you're going to find eggs on it. You're going to find chicken on it. You're going to find milk on it. You're going to find, not that those things are good, but because these things represent revenue streams.
Yeah, that reminds me, not too long ago I saw a video of another African-American doctor like yourself who was in Washington, D.C., basically pleading with the FDA, whoever it is that makes the food chart, you know better than I do, to remove milk as a recommended food, letting them know that in the majority of Americans who are now today people of color, African-American, Asian, Latino, Hispanic, however you want to say it.
Digest it.
They cannot, and it causes, they can't digest it. they're lactose intolerant, and it causes inflammation in the body. So he's pleading with them to take this off. And long story short, well, if you look at your chart, it's still there, so we know he lost. And so what I'm hearing you say is many medical professionals know that these things aren't good, and so as a result, you're getting medicine.
Right, and a lot of this stuff, and the medicine you get, the medicine you're taking for your high blood pressure does not cure your high blood pressure.
No,
it changes something else in your physiology to lower the pressure, which is important. That's important. But they'll tell you oftentimes you can't change your blood pressure. And you can't change your cholesterol level. And you can't change these things. Well, I'm going to tell you, we did a study at Trinity United Church of Christ with about 50 people under the auspices of Dr. Kim Williams, who's a brother who is a cardiologist, the chair of the Department of Cardiology at Rush University Hospital. And he was the past president of the American College of Cardiology, which represented over 40,000 cardiologists worldwide, who is also one who absolutely understands the role, the power of plants. And we don't get a chance to do that. And when you hear me talk about this all the time, I know people say, oh, here you come talking about the plants again. No, I do that because it took me all this time to finally understand that if we want to really deal with disease, we have to deal with it from its cause, not its effect. And so when we look at, for example, diabetes, they make you think that it has something to do, your blood sugar goes up, but it's not sugar that causes the problem. It's fat that causes the problem. Saturated fat, which is what's responsible for destroying the beta cells in the pancreas that create a problem for your insulin.
Wow.
And also it's fat that gets into the interstices of the muscles, that is between the muscle fibers, that create this insulin resistance. It is fat that is the major saturated fat. What's saturated fat? Any fat that's solid at room temperature. Any fat that's solid at room temperature. That's a saturated fat.
Wow.
So
basically all the fat that we have in our meats that we fry, bake, cook, things like that. Got you.
And there's in terms of milk, I was a part of that panel, and on Dr. Neil Barnard, which was probably the guy you're referring to, because he represents a group called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, to which I'm a member. We get testimony not only there, but in Chicago at the American Medical Association meeting to remove lactase intolerance as a disease. It's not a disease.
Huh.
Okay, being lactose intolerant doesn't mean something wrong with you. It means something very right with you. Because cow milk, which is the only source of the major source of lactose, was never designed for people to drink.
It's for cows.
Every mammal it's for a cow. Every mammal on the planet produces milk for its young. The female human being produces milk for its young, its baby. And when that baby is weaned from that, when that baby doesn't drink from the breast anymore, it doesn't need milk anymore. It can get the things that it needs from eating food. And what kind of food is that? It's food that comes out of the ground for the most part.
Gotcha.
And there are such powerful lobbies. The people really should look at movies like Food Inc. and they should look at Game Changers, what you talked about, and Forks Over Knives, and Diet Fiction, and all these sort of things, because we have not been given the entire truth about the role of food in our diseases. And if we did that, we would find, as we found in Trinity, when we put people on a plant-based diet for 40 days, just Lent, for 40 days, their inflammatory markers in the blood dropped over 40%. In 40 days, I'm not talking about 40 years, 40 days, their insulin levels went down, their blood sugars went down, their blood pressures came down, and they lost weight. In 40, we just couldn't afford to continue the study. I would love to be able to raise about $1 million, $1.5 million to do this on a major level across, in multiple churches across the country. Because we have the keys. We know what needs to be done. And that's why you keep hearing me talk about this, not because I'm sort of kook or fanatic, but because when you know that you know.
It's your purpose. You
and
care.
know that
Yeah.
That's my purpose. That's what I'm here for. That's why God has provided radio shows and all the other things. And I'm grateful to you, Linal, for allowing me to take so much time on your show.
Oh man,
morning.
look, it's necessary. And when we're talking about fundamentals of health and well-being, like I shared with you last night, I couldn't think of anybody else better to be in this conversation with. So Dr. Mason, I want to get to some tangibles.
Sure.
Because right now, I'm sure if anybody's been listening throughout the show, they are inspired to begin shifting and changing things in their lives. And so if I'm going to take action on my health and well-being, what would you say is maybe the first thing I should begin doing? Like a tangible action I can take. What's one of the first things I should be doing?
Well, what you want to do is create a mental environment that supports you. So that's why I said, look at the movies. Look at Forks Over Knives, if you haven't seen it. You can get all the stuff on Netflix now. Look at Forks Over Knives and see how we chronicled the journeys of regular, ordinary people.
And so
that's who we are.
And what I'm hearing you say, because you said this before, is create your own programming. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Sir. Yes, sir. You got to surround yourself with the inputs that help you change your outputs.
Well, that sounds familiar.
Well, it is your show, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I'm sure my listeners are listening like, wait. And by the way, I don't believe you said that because I say it. I believe you said it because that's what there is to say on this.
That's exactly why I said it. You know, I mean, not that I wouldn't say it because you said it, but because it's true. See, you cannot continue doing the same thing you're doing and expect a different result. They call that insanity, right?
Mm-hmm. And
you can't. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just noticing because I'm like, it's interesting. I'm trying to push you towards, and I'm trying to push you towards. Give us some tangibles, and I know I'm noticing as a doctor who has information. You're like, look, it don't even make sense for me to give you tangibles until I can really like you're focused on the programming, and I'm guessing it's because you've seen so much. You've told people to do. I'm sure you said, hey, look, drink more water, all right, exercise, and stop eating meat. And I'm sure you said it, and then you see them do the same thing. So now you're like, I'm not saying that on your show, Linal, because it doesn't matter if they're one, they have spiritual amnesia, two, they're not spiritually developed, and three, they don't have the right programming. It doesn't even matter. I could tell them all day these things. We're wasting our time. What I'm noticing is you're like, let's focus in on who you be, your spiritual development, and how you're programming yourself. That's what I keep hearing you go back to that.
I have to, because it's the most important part. Because I'm going to tell you something. When you want to change, let me tell you something. If there's a young lady out there that's looking at a particular young man and he isn't giving her the attention that she thinks she deserves, and the same thing is true on the other way, whether it's the young man or young woman or whatever, two women, two men, whatever it is, you will then go and investigate, find out, learn from other people.
Hey, now.
What it is. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I that's how I got my wife.
I mean, it ain't hard. It ain't hard to do.
Hey, I need to know more about her.
I want you to want to do it. I want you to see, because what's going to drive it, you got to want to do it.
You got to want to do it.
And when you want to do it, you got to do it regardless of whatever obstacle. And the most important obstacle you're going to do is the one you create for yourself. When you say I can't, that means I won't. Okay? So what you have to do, the information is out there. And all I ask people to do is just start. Start, get in where you fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And start. Don't think that you're going to change everything in a day. You know, don't do that. No. The thing you can do in a day is you can change your mind.
That's true.
But see, when you change your mind will then make your behind find what it needs to get the body in shape. It'll do it.
I love that.
You don't have to. Yeah. You don't have to do anything else. And what you do is, see, you got to make this decision for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, people ridicule me and all that stuff, but so what? I can't tell you the geniuses that people were ridiculing because
almost
they had
every one
a
of them.
different idea.
Almost
Yes.
everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And by the way, this is,
So what-
and let me say this.
Sure.
I don't see this as a different idea.
sir.
Based on just how I've changed my life. I mean, Dr. Mason, I'm 44 years old. I play basketball 3 times a week. And typically when I play 3 games on an NBA-sized court, running up and down with younger men. Okay? I'm 44. Most people, when I say that, they look at me like I'm crazy. And you're not afraid to get hurt, man? But what they don't realize is that I've decided that I wanted this level of physical capacity and ability. And so as a result, my entire life is designed around it, from what I put in my mouth to how much I sleep. Like I don't sit at my desk. I stand at my desk every day, all day. My entire life has been programmed around making sure I have the physical capacity, what I share with my Slay Your Goals members on Thursday night, that my foundational beliefs embrace the ideal state of physical being that I want.
Yeah, but you got to change your theology if you want to change. You have to change your theology if you want to change your biology. It's
Man.
just that simple.
And that's what you're pointing to. You're saying, what I'm hearing you
That's what I'm
say
pointing.
is that the fundamental, like if you want to get to the fundamentals of health and well-being, then I'm not going to tell you to drink more water. You know that. I'm not going to tell you to stop eating saturated fat. You know that. What I'm hearing you say, Dr. Mason, is I'm not going to tell you to exercise every day. You know that. Now, you might not believe it, like what you said earlier, right? It's because when you believe something, there's conviction and it creates action. You might not believe it. And so to believe it, what I want you to do is don't trust me. Don't listen to me. Go educate yourself. Go create your own programming that begins to permeate your conscious and your subconscious mind in a way that it begins to influence your actions. That's what I hear you saying.
That's right. You do the same thing you do to figure out how you're going to buy that new dress or that new suit for the money with money you ain't got yet. You're going to plan. You're going to think about it. You're going to figure out how much overtime. You're going to figure out what you got to do. Do I go to a resale shop? But let me just say that what we have to do, I was in Israel. I went over to Israel as a guest of Prince Asif in Israel and talked about basketball. Now, it was hot as hell in Israel. And when I was there, it was hot. I mean, hot.
Yeah.
And there were brothers out there, I would say the average age was about 64.
64?
Playing basketball.
My goodness, I love it.
Okay?
I love it.
So no, we don't, this whole notion that you got to fall apart is, no. You can do.
And they were playing in the hot heat.
You heard what I said, it was hot.
And it's the same kind of heat that many of our people who are north of 60 in the United States would say they can't walk in.
Yeah. They were playing basketball out there.
Wow.
So I'm just saying, brother, that we got to readjust our belief. And the same beliefs that we in one of these days we'll get to talking about branding and what that has done in terms of how it's devalued who we are as people. But the other piece to this is understanding that all the tools, and I tell people say, well, how do I get started? I say, you know what? Just start eating more vegetables and drinking more water.
Yeah.
Just start that way. You don't need a whole plan.
So
Because I'm gonna tell you, educated. Whatever you want to find out, you will. And I've already given you some places to start. Like I said, watch Forks Over Knives if you have, but watch it to learn. Don't watch it for entertainment. Watch it to learn and listen to the spirit that comes through these people. I met all those people when we did the premiere. I met the Sandera Nation.
because you are a contributor on Forks Over Knives, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I was in the movie.
And you were in that movie. You're also a contributor in Game Changers. You were in that movie.
Yep. As
But-
well as diet fiction, and as well, yeah. I mean,
the list goes on. But
to,
Dr. Mason's not going to tell y'all. And matter of fact, I consider us friends, and he didn't even tell me. I had to watch Game Changers. I'm sitting there, and I said, "Is that Doc? Is that Doc?" I had to reverse it. Doc, I think I text you. You in Game Changers? Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Come on. Why didn't we have a premiere? Why didn't we, but Dr. Mason, this is just, I think it goes to show who you are and how purpose-based you are when it comes to this work and how much you care.
But you know what, Linal? It doesn't so much about who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It tells about whose I am.
Well, go ahead and say that. That's important too. Go ahead and say that.
Okay? Because I've had a remarkable journey. God has given me the opportunity that I never in my life could even have envisioned. You understand what I'm saying? As a kid growing up in Inglewood from broken home and all of the bad stuff that you can imagine. But you just keep pressing on. And the universe will respond to that when you are earnest in what it is you're doing. And you are not looking to do something for yourself. My whole thing has been about my family and my extended family and my community. I mean, that's why I went to school. That was the marching orders that I received spiritually. When Elijah Muhammad stood up and talked about we're going to have a hospital for the black man, and everywhere he turned with the money to build that hospital, he met opposition, strong opposition, to the point that we never could get it built.
Wow!
And as a result, we still haven't. But it doesn't dampen my spirit. We look at the fact, ain't no Calvary coming.
No,
ain't no Calvary coming. Ain't nobody gonna save us. Ain't nobody gonna redeem us. Ain't nobody gonna build for us. Ain't nobody gonna do for us if we don't choose to do what Elijah Muhammad said, and that is do for self. That's what everybody else do. Dogs do it. Cats do it. All people of other ethnic beliefs, persuasions do it, and we don't have because we don't make it.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what you were sharing earlier in terms of spiritual development. And I would say one of my beliefs is that many of us are spiritually dormant and spiritually unaware of our own significance. And as a result of that, that's why we've fallen victim to these schemes that have us unhealthy, these schemes that have us living beneath our purpose, these schemes that have us in many ways feeling lost, without peace, when all of those things are available to us in this life. And I know because you live your purpose, you have a great deal of peace. You have a great deal of certainty in your life. You have a great deal of direction. And
there was no special thing that happened, man. I think that what we've done is we've forgotten how to tap into that immeasurable reservoir of power called faith.
Yeah, agreed.
And that faith, and I'm not talking about a denominational set of doctrines. And those doctrines, I don't care what denomination you belong to, if they don't speak to you and allow you to access the power of God in you, then you're not getting the right thing. See, that's the whole point. This is not for something external. It's not for something you dress up for on a Sunday and go. That's not what church is for. And if that's what you're going for the wrong reason. You need to listen to the word and figure out how that word applies to your life. And then you apply that word. And if you're not getting that word, then you're sitting in the wrong place.
Wow. Well.
And so we can, the message used to always say, up you mighty nation, you can accomplish what you will. And I say to all your listeners out there, up you mighty people, we can accomplish what we will. If we will it and we act on that will, we'll do it.
That's true.
We don't need to be begging people for nothing for us.
That's true.
We got, all these people got all these MBAs and all kinds of degrees and what have you. It ain't that we don't know.
Yep.
So why don't we do? And that's that spiritual piece. That's that identity piece that's creating problems for us. And we have to acknowledge it. It don't matter how well we dress it up or dress it down. If we don't dress it out, it ain't going to do nothing.
Wow.
Pardon my colloquialism.
No, it's dead on. Dr. Mason, we got a couple of calls that have been hanging on for a long time. Let's, I'm hoping they have questions that they want to ask, and so that you can answer them as quickly as possible. I'm going to try to get to 3 real fast. Let's go to line 2. Art.
Okay.
Art, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Assalamu alaikum to both of you all. First, a statement.
Brother Art.
How are you, sir? Would you agree that if, just dealing with black people, we stop the smoking, the drinking, and exercise, we probably solve almost 70% of our problems?
I would say I'd add one other thing to that. We got to change the way we eat.
Yeah, I agree.
Last point,
but you still got to put the right stuff in.
Yes, sir.
And most of that stuff comes from plants.
And if we get back to the community codes of conduct and family values, we can change our entire condition.
Yes, sir. Why not?
Believe that.
We got the power to change anything we want. Thank you so much, brother.
Yep, let's go to Aiken. Aiken on line 3. Aiken, good morning.
This is Akin Tola. Hey, I am so blessed. Let's get to the point. Doc, I heard you. I heard you said that the brain is the master computer and the control system, that's what you said, the center for the entire body. Our setback is I get that. We say about the white man or the black man, it's about the right man at the right time. Of these things you said, put them in remembrance. You too, brother Dr. Linal. We're not to argue about words to no profit, Profit. For this is the scripture now. For the subverting of the hearer. Shew thyself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now, that's what you said. We were given dominion over the earth, not the earth over us.
That's right.
I've learned so much from Dr. Fatonia, Dr. Henry Brucker, Dr. Fatonia. But guess what? Dr. Dick Gregory, if we don't take it, we don't deserve it. 1.5 million ain't a lot of money. Everybody and their mama and their grandmama should be donating and taking your class and Brother Linal's class. I had 4 strokes.
Wow. Thanks for the phone call. I'm trying to get to the Anita.
Thank you. Yes, sir, brother.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
That was good stuff. Anita, you're on line 4. Let's go.
Good morning. I wanted to say thank you for speaking of Elijah Muhammad's hospital vision, because my husband, Alan Omar, worked on the...
Oh, I know Alan Omar.
Years ago. Yeah. Well, I was his first wife, and that's what he was working on for Imam W.D. Muhammad. And Dr. Ramadan had tried to start it at first. I think I wasn't around at that point. But then Alan did. I haven't forgotten about that, because I had a great aunt that died of a stroke, and she couldn't eat pork. It would make her really sick. So I haven't forgotten, that's what Elijah Muhammad wanted, and I still want to have that done. All my children are Muslim. One of them is a physician, and we're going to make that work. We're going to get it done.
Well, thank you, sister. I appreciate putting out that positive energy into the universe.
Well, Dr. Mason, man, I want to thank you for coming on this morning. Any final words before we let you go?
The only thing I would say is that it's not just in the hearing. The hearing is important, but the doing is most important.
Yes.
So if you've heard something that you can use, if God has inspired you just through me to say something to your spirit that makes you want to make a change in your life, do it and don't look back. Don't look back. The winds blow very hard on the trees, and sometimes they bend almost to the ground, but they don't break. So if you got to bend, it's all right. Bend away from the things that are keeping you, holding you hostage from your greatness. And I know we don't speak this kind of words to ourselves, but that's who we are. Yeah. We are descendants of the greatest people on the planet. Mm-hmm. So now let's act like it.
Well, Dr. Mason, I want to thank you for your time this morning, for the sacrifice you made to be here and to share your purpose and your work with us. I'm incredibly grateful. Man, this is, I'll tell you, a conversation that even I didn't necessarily expect because I thought we'd get into more tangibles. But when I think about the fundamentals of health and well-being, and I think about the work that we both do in terms of looking to transform how people think, looking to transform who people are and the experience that they have with themselves, I'm incredibly grateful that you did your work this morning, and I trust you to do your work when it comes to health and well-being. And that you, in many ways, exhorted us to further spiritually develop ourselves, question our beliefs. If I'm not taking action on it, do I really believe it? And more than anything, reprogramming ourselves, getting off the current, we might call it mass programming, and truly begin programming ourselves aligned with God's purpose for our lives. Dr. Mason, thank you. I acknowledge you.
Thank you so much, Linal.
Yeah, and you all make sure.
I'll see everybody in about.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, make sure you tune in at 10 a.m. for Doctors in the House with Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Terry Mason, thank you. Hey, man, phenomenal show this morning, Dr. Terry Mason. I can't be more ecstatic about what he shared with you all in terms of the fundamentals of health and well-being. Let me tell you, over the coming weeks, you want to stay tuned. I'll be bringing in experts as we cover the 4 pillars of life. First and foremost, health and well-being we talked about today. Later, relationships and love. Work and money. Know you care about that. And then ultimately, purpose and spirituality, which you're going to hear a lot about purpose and spirituality if you can't tell. Because when you get into these fundamentals, that is the foundation. Once again, if you don't know your purpose, join me November 7th. You can find out more information by going to my website at linalharris.com. I'd love to support you because my purpose is your ultimate success. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the Talk of Chicago. Until next week, be blessed.
The Talk of Chicago.
All right, you guys.
And the voice of the
You heard the doctor.
WVON, Berwyn, Chicago.
Change your programming.
The FBI has been looking at
Get your spiritual development under par. He didn't say religion. He was very, very, very clear to be like, it's not about religion. It's about your spiritual development. So get your spiritual development working right. And more than anything, question your beliefs if you're not taking action. Those are the fundamentals. Hey, I wrote down water, movement, and then spiritual development. He's like, nah, spiritual development. When you get that, you'll drink the water, you'll move. I believe that. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. Please share the stream, you all. This is important. This is important to our community. It's important to our health, and challenge them to listen all the way through. They care about their own lives. Will you listen all the way through? All right. Thank you, guys. Love you. And looking forward to supporting you in the future. Until then, God bless.